polymer clay demo for Polymer Clay TV is on an amazing product called Amazing Mold Putty. And we talked about this last week. This is a two-part molding material. There's a white part and a yellow part, and this is the 2/3 of a pound kit that I'm holding in my hands. And what we need to do in order to make a mold of almost anything is get an equal piece of white and an equal piece of yellow and blend them together. And that's what I have right here on my work surface. I've prepared a piece of white and a piece of yellow, and you can take them out of their package and let them sit on your work surface as long as they're separate, because once we mix them together they catalyze and a chemical reaction happens and they start to have the reaction that's actually going to harden the silicone into more of like a rubber consistency, and it won't be workable anymore. So what you really need to do here is blend it quickly so that you don't see any more streaks. For example, this is still streaky. I can still see bits of white in the yellow, so I've got to keep going. And what I'm going to mold right now is a rubber stamp. And I have this pretty little Indian floral rubber stamp. Stamp Rosa used to make these, but they discontinued the India line, and I happen to have several of them because Indian design is one of my favorites. So what I'm going to do is mold the stamp so that I can not only get an impressed design in my clay, but also create this raised design by pushing my clay into the mold that I'm about to make. So what I'm doing here is really trying to press the putty into one piece, one ball that has no more cracks or lines in it, because those cracks or lines will transfer onto your mold. So you really want it to be smooth, no cracks, and I'm going to just press it onto the stamp. And then, because I want the back of this to be flat in case I ever wanted to say bake some clay into it, I'm actually going to turn it over, press the stamp in, and allow this to sit. It takes about 15 minutes for the mold to set. And you can really do some incredible things here. I have some examples. This is a piece of brass, open work, like a filigree. And I made a mold with the mold putty, and look at the depth of what I got out of this. I was a little nervous to do it because there are so many holes in this mold, and if I were doing this conventionally, like with plaster or even with polymer clay, I would be afraid that this would get stuck in the mold. But because of the mold putty's consistency, it actually creates a mold with these beautiful raised areas. And you know, as you can see, this pops right out of there. And here you can see one of the characteristics of mold putty. When I first created this mold, I didn't put enough mold putty right here. And when I flipped it over and took a look at it, I had a deficiency, and if I had poured clay in here it would have dripped out. So I actually took a piece of Amazing Mold Putty after this had set and added it to the mold on this end here, and you can see the seam where I joined them right there, but I was careful on the inside here to make sure that that seam was not visible. And you can actually add more silicone Amazing Mold Putty to a mold that's already been formed, and it will join to itself. So you can make a mold thicker or repair a spot where you didn't make it right. And then here's something that I have done with this particular mold, is I poured Kato liquid clay that I had tinted heavily with powdered pigments in a gold color. I poured that into the mold and I baked it and then popped it out, and I'm in the process here of filling in the crevices. And the unmolding of this particular mold, which I've done in the same way. It's a piece of brass filigree, and this is the step after baking. I tinted it with silver powder, and I'm going to unmold this and show a faux faience project. And this one right here is another piece of brass with lots of holes in it that I will be showing in Polymer Clay Classroom when I unmold and see how this looks. It's going to be gorgeous. It's a sort of 5-pointed flower with lots and lots of little holes to fill in with something like either more polymer clay or a liquid polymer clay design to do a faux cloisonne or faux faience. It's going to be very, very nice. Okay, so let's unmold the stamp. You can see that it has a nice flat surface, so when I want to put this into my oven later, I can set it on that flat surface. And it just comes right off the stamp. And now I have the negative impression. So when I press clay into this, I'm going to have the flowers raised instead of indented. And let me find a little piece of clay to... Here's some. And there you have it, see, with no mold release. It just went in and came right out, and it's a very nice mold of how that stamp actually looks. So there's a reason you might want to mold a really cool rubber stamp that you have so that you can make a raised design that looks just like the stamp. So play with your amazing mold putty. Don't be afraid to mold something that has lots of spaces or what we call undercuts, because it's so flexible and you can bake things right in it and just pop them right out. And this mold is going to last for a long time, and you can see here that my amazing mold putty, I have half of it left, and I've made probably around 20 molds this size already. So if you are sparing with the product and you use just what you need to make your mold, so don't overuse it, because it doesn't have to be thick. This is about 1/4 of an inch thick right here, and it'll go really far. And we do have it in our shop, and in Polymer Clay Classroom I'm going to show you how to do a project from beginning to end using a brass filigree as my molded piece. So be sure to check that out and come back next Friday for Polymer Clay Podcast.
You send me some sorry lines